Good evening and welcome to this opening event. We are in the UpTown district for the fourth appointment of the Green Week, organized by Milano UpTown, coinciding with the 10th anniversary of the Climate Week in New York City. So good morning also to our friends in the US, in the Eastern US, I would say good morning to everybody. And well, we are opening a series of events that will last next Sunday, and every event will be connected to the theme of sustainability. We will talk about climate crisis and urban transportations, the challenge of sustainable cities. First of all, I want to call the president of Euro Milano, Luigi Borré, who should be connected with us in streaming somewhere. Luigi, can you hear us?
Okay. Thank you, Director Cattaneo. Let me tell you a few words about Euro Milano. Euro Milano is a real estate development and consulting company operating since 1986. We are engaged in large urban areas regeneration projects, and our track record includes some of the innovative interventions of the last decade in the Milan area. We have been working on the theme of sustainability for years, and our view is that it is not just an environmental issue, but also an economic and social one. We are conscious that when we develop a new city district, we are leaving a footprint that is not just physical, but also environmental and social and economical, and has an impact for tens of years or even for centuries. We are also conscious that this is our heritage to the next generations. So this is why we keep studying the event of this evening is an example and trying to improve and implement techniques that can make more sustainable our activity, our research activity, and our implementation pass through the concept of smart city and smart district, and now are aiming to a concept of well-being city and healthy city. Let me say that our ambition is to translate these concepts in an effective real estate products that can be really sustainable. Today, probably the most prominent example of our effort is the UpTown district, the UpTown project that is the one we are developing in Milan inside the vast area of Cascina Merlata, where you are there in this moment. So let me say that we are really grateful to Climate Group for having accepted our roundtable, this roundtable scheduled as part of the events of the New York City 2021 Climate Week. For us, it's an honor and a big responsibility at the same time, and we consider it as an important acknowledgement of an effort that our company began many years ago. I'd like to thank all of our panelists since their presence here today allowed us to organize this workshop in the context of the NYC 2021 Climate Week. And finally, let me thank also Fabio Brioschi and Valeria Lorenzelli, who coordinated for Euro Milano this event, and to our staff involved this evening. I don't want to use more minutes, and dear Director Cattaneo, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, President Borré. And well, let's get started with the first event, the roundtable concerning cities and climate crisis, Milan and Europe at the forefront of global challenge. Well, we should have three guests with us. The first one should be Katarina Sarfati, Director Inclusive Climate Action of the C40 Cities Network. She's not here yet, so she will join us later. The other two guests are Tobia Zevi, Associate Research Fellow Global Cities Program of ISPI, the Istituto Italiano per gli Studi di Politica Internazionale, and Piero Pellizzaro, Chief Resilient Officer of the Municipality of Milan. So the first question I want to ask Tobia Zevi is, Tobia, historically speaking, Europe has been the first continent affected by the human impact. I will say the cities were born in Europe, the big cities were born in Europe, and we remember in the 60s and the 70s the big pollution that we had in cities like London, but also in Milan, where we are now. How has the approach to urbanization changed in the last several decades?
So thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you very much to Euro Milano and UpTown for this panel and this initiative. We are partners between Euro Milano and ISPI in our program on global cities. We've been working together for about 2 years, and the interesting part is that these 2 years are not 2 normal years. We have been dealing with the issue of cities and cities development within the 2 years of this huge pandemic, with huge rising questions and actually problems which are not easy to tackle and to solve. So going to your question, I agree with the fact that Europe is a particularly interesting context for the analysis of urban development and in general of city planning, since Europe has always been a urban continent. We could actually go back to the Roman Empire and identify this network of cities, medium, small, and big cities, which were mainly planned by the Romans, and that have been actually afterwards developing along the centuries and the decades, and that have brought us to our to our continent of today. And so European cities have some characteristics which are useful to mention in this context because they are different from other continents. The first one is that the great majority of European cities are not huge cities, are not mega cities, are not big capitals as we have in other continents. Let's think, for example, about South America or Asia. We are mainly talking about small and medium cities, which makes Europe be a balanced continent in terms of urbanizations. So these cities are, of course, diverse. They are different between themselves because they are wealthier or poorer. It depends on whether they were very much industrialized cities or if they are more like service cities. So this has been a big difference. And of course, they are different within themselves because they have migrants, they have different ways of developing, and of course, they are different between north and south, and east and west. So within this context, there are two very big news, let's say, coming out of the last two years. The first one is, of course, the European Green Deal, and I'm sure we will be talking about it later. So the very ambitious challenge that the European Commission set in order to transform our continent and our cities and our lives in more sustainable ones, and then of course the pandemic of COVID-19. These two big challenges, which are extremely difficult to describe, of course we'll be talking about them, but it's a very big issue, have brought the European debate in the past 2 years to evolve and to discuss about different paradigms and different models. I'm thinking about the 15-minute cities, which is something that interests Milan and of course Paris and other cities, and then other kind of projects and planning, which are of course new and then also important to describe. I think, for example, about a model which was developed by the University of Milan, the Polytechnic of Milan, talking about the three-dimensional cities. So a city which started rethinking itself because of the pandemic. Now, I want to conclude this first intervention just saying one thing which is politically important, in my opinion, in this context. And the issue is, if we want to transform Europe in order to make it more ecological, efficient, we need to involve cities, and involving cities, we need to involve citizens. Now, to do this, we need to rethink the political structure of the European Union, because until now, we have had a very, very urbanized continent, as we have said just before, but a very, very weak structure and a very, very weak engagement of cities within the big projects and the big initiatives of Europe. I think about the regional funds, the development funds, and all the other issues. Now, things are changing in the past years, but what I believe is important to underline is that cities need to be more at the core of these challenges, more at the core of the European structures, and more involved also in a multi-level way. Think about the civil societies and city networks and all these things, because otherwise we take the risk imagining wonderful transitions, but then we don't have the legs to make them walk properly on the field. So this is what I would like to push and underline at the beginning, and then of course we're going to be talking about the rest.
So thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Tobia. We will ask you some other questions later, but let me welcome Katarina Sarfati, who joined us finally, and thank you, Katarina, because I felt a little bit alone here. As I told you, she is Director Inclusive Climate Action of the C40 Cities Network. So from your privileged point of view, which are the main problems, concerning the climate crisis, of course, and climate emergencies? We have seen the images of the New York subway filled with water with the last hurricane that hit the city. Which are the main problems affecting the cities, even with the differences from continent to continent and from let's say, from big towns to small towns?
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thanks for the invitation. Good morning to people following from the US. It's nice to be in an in-person meeting for once, even if virtual. So as maybe people know, C40 Cities is a network of the mega cities of the world. So we work with mayors of the big cities from Beijing to New York and everything that comes in the middle. So our perspective is the one of mega cities, of course, also working with smaller and medium-sized cities. First of all, I would say that the climate crisis and the climate breakdown is definitely an issue of the present and not anymore of the future. This is what all of our cities are telling us. We do regular surveys every year, and every year 98% of our member cities tell us that they are already experiencing the effects and the impacts of the climate crisis. It can be stronger hurricanes, it can be flooding, it can be heat waves, whatever the impact is, 99% of our cities are already experiencing. I always mention the mayor of Houston. Houston, we have a problem. I always mention the mayor of Houston telling us, what normally happened every 300, 400 years, now is hitting my city every 1-2 years. So the frequency of extreme weather events like hurricanes and flooding is incredibly increasing in the majority of the cities. And this is not just a global south issue, it's also a global north issue, as we have seen in the US and in other places of the world. So what is the challenges for cities and also for national governments? You know, many people in this period, in the national debate, in the European debate, we talk about the costs of the transition. Like, you know, we have to do this ecological, energetic transition. What are the costs? Well, people don't often talk about the costs of the non-transition that we are actually seeing in cities. Let me make some examples. Heat waves have an incredible economical cost in terms of reduction of productivity. We have some data in C40 of a report that we recently launched. We calculated that 20% of goods and services in the construction and manufacturing services could be reduced due to heat waves, and it could cost over $2 trillion, so a big portion of the world economic by 2030. Energetic costs, like we are hearing in this period, the debate around the increase of energy prices. Franz Timmermans very well said the other day, we're experiencing this huge cost in terms of energy prices, not because of the ecological and energetic transition, but because the energy transition is not happening fast enough. And therefore we are in this situation. And the more we move forward, the more it will be so. 800 million people live close to the majority of the power plants in cities and will experience energetic cuts and, of course, economical costs because of these energetic cuts in the next few years. And, of course, it's also an issue of services. You know, when there is a big flooding, transportation doesn't work anymore. When transportation doesn't work anymore, people cannot go to the job anymore, cannot bring their children to school. It's, of course, a vicious circle that impacts all of our cities from a social, economical, and human perspective. And that is the last point I would make in terms of problems. Then let's maybe face solutions as well afterwards. But in terms of problems, who bears this cost more? Without doubt, the fact that we're experiencing in our cities is the fact that it's not the rich people in the center of the city having the best districts and the best facilities, the best homes, the best jobs that experience the cost of the climate crisis. It's the poorest, it's the most discriminated, it's the most marginalized. In cities, it's isolated elderly, low-income elderly that suffer from heat waves. In the South, in the global South, it's unemployed women who move and are forced to move due to the impact of climate change. In France, in that terrible summer that we all remember of 2003, 75% of people who died were women. After the Hurricane Katrina, 2/3 of the jobs lost due to Hurricane Katrina were women, and were Black American women. So again, the ecological transition and the climate crisis is not an issue that relates to the most privileged. It's an issue that relates to everybody and normally relates to the more discriminated and more marginalized. It's an issue of social justice. And on this, I think cities can play a role in finding solutions, also because we need to be fast. Another problem is that the impacts of the climate crisis are being experienced in a fast way, and in a more rapid and growing fast way, and the solutions need to come very, very quickly and very, very fast, in a fast way.
Thank you so much, Katerina. Thank you for mentioning the heat waves, and in particular the heat wave of 23, because, well, I remember that at that time I moved to Rome, and I started living in the capital city of Italy in 2003, but I was born and raised in Milan. So let's come to Milan. I remember how Milan was in the 70s or in the late 60s when I was a child. And I want to call Piero Pellizzaro because when I come back to Milan, and I come quite frequently, but I always see Milan changing, and it has changed a lot during the last several years. So I want to ask Piero Pellizzaro how the city has changed, which were the strategies in order to try to have a sustainable city, in order to try to look at the wealth of people and the wealth of the environment.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for the one in the US. So the city has been changing over the last 10 years, even more. We're starting thinking about how we're thinking the way how we approach this in terms of mobility, in terms of public space, in terms of greening. That was a long story starting with the area beer, and I was going through the other. So there was first element how like a tax, there is a recent recent report that is exploring how this kind of investment charge is helping to mitigate the impact on the health, especially in kids. And we'll see that there was an element.
Freezed.
Somewhere.
There's not such a good connection, Pierre. We didn't hear the last statements.
No, I also have the same issue with you, well, that's anyway. With the congestion charge was starting more than 10 years ago. One of the most impactful how we looked at the number of the health, especially on kids' health. There was a recent report that was published and shared by the University and other research. That was one of the first elements. We see how congestion charge is not an element only of mobility, but was, as Katarina was saying, it was how we reduce the cost, especially on health. That was an example of this change. The city now is also changing more and more faster on greening the city. The new urban forest program we're now reaching more than 300,000 trees with an area of the land. And we got more than 28,000 trees in the land last year. It is a significant result that for the 10 years project, we got like around 6,000 trees per year. So we increased significantly the number of trees. Why this is important? Yes, trees is a contribution to mitigate the CO2 emission, but really is more compared to what we need to do. What is more important for trees is one of the elements that Katarina was going to highlight is the heat waves, how we can do the capacity of the city to the heat island effect on the side. So with increasing the canopy of the tree, it could lead more to more sustainable in terms of health city during the heat wave. On the other end, what is important for us, greening the city is also an important element to increase the capacity to create added value for all the kind of commercial activities on our side, but also it could be an important contribution to make the public space more beautiful. If you go through the recent year, we have seen also a lot of changing perspective of the public space. If you look at Strada Aperta, Piazza Aperta, there is two initiatives launched by the municipality together with of Ahmad. There is an important element when you couple the needs of inclusive cities to create more dialogue, to create more space that people could meet, and a necessary sustainable approach of the city. Because when we think of Piazza Aperta, people look on the colors, but these colors are helping to reflect the solar during the summertime. At the same time, moving to the Piazza Aperta to reduce the number of parking spots, basically a lot of media, and taking back the people to the street. That is something that is really necessary. On the other end, there is also other initiatives that the city has been taken in terms of let's say, looks more sustainable in terms of climate change and more sustainable even from the production. So when we look at our waste management, process. The waste management is now moved into a new era of the circularity of the resources. We have seen it is necessary because of the fashion, for example, and the design. We have the capacity to improve the circularity, and with the rate we have now, Milan is one of the leading cities in Europe and on the global scale for door waste collection, because then you have what it's about door waste collection. We got more than 68% of organic waste, and it's quite a unique experience at the global scale. And then it's also something that is to the city. It's now looking how we should look at the sustainability, not only from the perspective of environmental perspective, but also how we can work more cities in terms of equity and in terms of opportunity. This will be the challenge of the next few years, especially with the new investment coming for the national government with the Recovery and Resilience Facility Fund and all the other funding. But I think the city, it's, we need to do more, and something that it's, what Katarina was highlighting, we also should look more at the negative impact of sustainability, because we need also to be a leaders, not only to look at the positive side of sustainability, but also the negative of sustainability. And there are, when there is to create some certification process, because what Katarina was also was highlighting before, we normally call climate gentrification. When the people, the poor, the vulnerable population doesn't have the capacity to reallocate themselves after a tornado or after a hurricane, whatever. And we need to look also how we should be always there that sustainability should be not an opportunity to increase the diversity, but always to be seen as an opportunity to increase the inclusiveness and equity.
Thank you, Piero, for your answer. And well, let's go back to Katarina and let's go back to the future. So let's say that the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations contemplates 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We know that most of them are already late. Some are very late, I would say. What do you think? Well, I think that many of these sustainable development goals will involve cities as urbanization is growing faster and faster all over the world. Which will be, in your opinion, the role of the cities in trying to reach the 17 goals of the United Nations, and which are the strategies that the C40 network is adopting for that?
Yes, thanks for this question. Well, I would start by quoting C40's chair, the mayor of Los Angeles, who recently stated, nobody is doing enough on the SDGs and the goals, and nobody is doing enough on respecting the Paris Agreement and that objective of keeping global warming under 2 degrees. I think the Prime Minister of Italy, as President of G20, a few days ago said we are on a trajectory of 3 degrees warming, which means a different civilization from what we know now. It's not a small change. Nobody's doing enough, I was saying, but the only sort of political actors and institutional actors that are doing something are mayors and cities. Of course, it's a debatable statement, but from our perspective, for example, we see that the national governments who have concrete climate action plans and commitments that respect the goals on sustainability, green job creation, and the Paris Agreement are 3 or 4. I think there is one that is considered Paris compatible, Gambia, if I'm not wrong. There are up to 1,000 cities in the world that have commitments that are compatible with that agenda and with the Paris Agreement, and there are around 100 that have concrete action plans and are delivering concrete action compatible with those goals. So there is, first of all, a sort of quantitative difference, even if, of course, nobody's doing enough and we need to do much quicker and much faster. Why I think mayors are so well placed and cities are so well placed to have a strong impact in developing these goals and delivering these goals. First of all, I think Tobia was mentioning it before, they are in direct contact with citizens, and they are the first sort of respondents, institutional frontline respondents to the problems and the needs of citizens, and therefore have a more urgency in saying something and doing something. They have to be more concrete by default. Second, they have direct competence and powers on key strategic areas like buildings, like how we warm up and refresh the homes we live in, the offices we work in, the schools that our children go in. They have direct powers on waste management. They have direct powers on urban development. They have direct responsibilities on transportation. So they have a big stake when we talk about curbing emission and increasing resilience. Of course, they cannot do it alone. For example, they don't have direct powers often in energy production and energy distribution, which is a big element. But they do have direct responsibility and direct powers to really make a difference. We calculate that around 70% of the emissions worldwide happen in cities. So this is, of course, is a big number. Third, I would say that because they are directly involved in sustainability policies, but also social policies, economical policies, they have direct contact with key stakeholders like unions, businesses, civil society, youth. Many of our mayors are working directly with Fridays for Future and the youth movement. Because of all of this, they can play a strong role in showing in practice what a just transition looks like and what equitable and inclusive climate action is. You know, we've talked a lot about the Gilets jaunes a few years ago, of this protest because of a bottom-up tax on fuel that sort of made lots of people at the beginning protest against the national government. I think that if the energy transition is not just, is not socially desirable, we will see thousands and thousands of gilets jaunes all over the world, in particular with this energy crisis that we're monitoring. Well, mayors are showing what it means to do equitable climate action. You know, for example, we're working with Warsaw in phasing coal from low-income buildings for low-income families. We're working with Barcelona to really tackle energy poverty. Barcelona has a very big ambition on ending energy poverty by 2030 and doing so through energy advisors that work with elderly and low-income families and doing so in a sustainable way with clean energy. We're working, for example, with South African cities in involving unions and workers in the energy transition so that fossil fuel phase-out can really be done in a way that leaves no worker behind, which is, of course, a big demand by unions and workers. So again, if I see the difference between most of the national governments and most of the mayors, it's the concreteness and practice of avoiding what Piero called climate gentrification and ensuring that a real just transition can be put in place. Of course, and this would be my last point, as I was mentioning before, they cannot do it alone. We have calculated with C40 that in the next 10 years, if the majority of the so-called recovery funds and green stimulus coming from the recovery plans of the world is addressed in cities on climate action, we can create millions of new jobs. We can reduce health costs thanks to improved air quality. We can save thousands of premature deaths because of better air. And we can, of course, halve emissions like we have to according to the Paris Agreement. But this needs direct investment, needs direct support, needs new governance models, and therefore needs a systemic change that really needs everybody and not just mayors.
Well, thank you, Katarina, because you reminded me something I always say. Well, you said that 70% of the global emissions are made in the cities, while I always say that if you want to ask someone what are the consequences of the global warming, you have to ask farmers. because they are those who had the changing seasons for their crops. Crops are changing all over the world and quite quickly. We are cultivating mangoes in southern Italy that was not possible to cultivate until 20 years ago. So the things are changing quickly in the rural areas. And we don't even notice usually in the cities, because a hot summer for us means mostly having the aircon on for more time, and that's it. While you said there's a lot of things that cities can do and the citizens in the cities can do in order to challenge the global crisis of climate change. So I want to ask Tobia Zevi something, because with its Green New Deal, the European Union has put itself at the forefront of the challenge to face the climate change. But there are some big differences, Tobia, in the different countries in the European Union, I would say. There are some countries, mostly northern countries, that have already put some actions, big actions, let's say, the way they produce their own energy, and some other countries that are still on their way. How do you think that the European Union can reach some more uniform results in the next years?
So first of all, I would like to say that I perfectly agree with Katerina when she says that, of course, we are talking about something very, very urgent, something necessary in the present. And of course, that cities can play a specific and I would say crucial role within this global challenge. Now, going to your question, I would first of all underline two aspects, which are, in my opinion, very important. The first one is that the European Green Deal, which is very, very precious, ambitious, and of course something important for this Commission and for our continent, was presented before the pandemic. We are, I would say, in September 2019. So it is very important, in my opinion, to state today, that it was not granted that after such a huge disaster in terms of healthcare, but also in terms of economy, the European Union decides to move forward within this challenge and decide to rebuild its economy and its social structure in a more sustainable way, according to the European Green Deal, despite the other possible solutions. I mean, it would have been quite normal to think about the European Union saying economy first after the pandemic. This is not happening, and this is very important, and I think we need to be proud about this political decision of our European Union. On the other hand, we must say, and this is the second the second thing I want to underline before going to your question, is that this green transition, beyond the Green Deal and beyond all the statements and all the positions we can express, it's a huge social challenge. It is very likely that, as Katarina said before, not only climate change affects more specifically poorer people, but also the green transitions we risk that it costs more to poor people. So we need to find a way to explain to people, explain all of us, that there are possible solutions to proceed in this very important direction without actually without penalizing the poor people and those who are already affected more by the crisis following the pandemic of COVID-19. So I would say that in order to move forward and of course develop the Green Deal in a good way, we need to do three things which are already proceeding in Europe, which are already being done in Europe, in many European countries, you were mentioning differences between different countries, and of course we have different experience between the north and the south, but for example, Spain or Portugal are doing very well in this general framework of the Green Deal, which also implies, as you already know, the goal of 100 climate neutral cities in 2030. So it's not only a general goal, but it's something which is very specific. So the first thing I would like to mention is that the successful experiences in this field, talking about green transitions, explain us that we need to have a multi-level governance and a multi-stakeholder organization within this project. If we want to make the change effective, we need different kind of organizations and different layers of governance working together. Because if we think, as we were saying before, in the case of the Gilets jaunes, to impose taxes or changes without involving and explaining people, and this is, in the case of cities, is particularly evident, then we will risk to actually find ourselves against people in the change instead of involving people within the change. The second issue is that we need public-private partnerships. This is something which is very common in cities. We know that big development projects, and Milano is one example, of course, and UpTown is one example, but many other projects are always the fruit of a collaboration between institutions and private companies. In the case of green transition, and green transition in Europe, but everywhere, we need the blending, we need the mixture, we need the collaboration between institutions and private. We know that there are many things that private can do better than institutions, and it is the case of management of many plans, of many services, and all this. But we also know that there are some investments which are too long in time, or which are too relevant for social issues in order to be left completely to the private. In those cases, we need to find the right blend between private and public, and in this way we can actually move the change towards green transition, actually benefiting from the two sides. And the third and last point I would like to mention is that, of course, we need to, as I said before, truly believe that people, every and each person are the key for this change. If we are not able to make people feel part of this change, then, and this is not just a slogan, we will lose our occasion. And I want to make just one example, which comes from Italy, and in my opinion, it's very important. We have in Italy a law which talks about the so-named energetic communities, which means people being together within a building, within several buildings, in order to, take together energy from solar panels and then, of course, distribute within the building and, of course, outside the building according to the necessities of everyone. Now, there is another law in Italy which is very important, which is the so-named super bonus, which sort of promotes the retrofitting of all the buildings, private and public, in order to make them energetic more efficiency. Now, if we, for example, are able to explain people that coming from Europe, the money of Europe, we have extremely important opportunities. These two are just an example. Retrofitting the building, which means paying less energy, which is something very actual at the moment in Italy because we have the bills going up. And of course, you can make the change with an electric car, with a new building, with less paying for energy and all this kind of stuff. And this change your life together with, in the general framework of a more safe and sustainable environment, then we can actually, in my opinion, afford the cost of change, and we can also make true the sentence we always repeat, that of course the change starts from every single person. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tobia, and thank you for mentioning the pandemic, because I think that one of the big lessons we should learn from these 2 years of global burden, is that we should invest a lot in prevention, which is somehow what we should have made with climate change probably 40 years ago, or at least 30 years ago, and we didn't. But well, we still have some time, not a lot, in order to I don't want to say save the planet, because it's not saving the planet, it's saving our lifestyle probably. In some way. So I want to ask Piero Pellizzaro. We have seen before what Milan has done in the last several years, in the last 10 years, Piero. But I want to ask you, even considering the plans at a national and international level, what's next with Milan?
What was next for Milan? It's a good question for a lot of candidates at the moment. They are running for a position in the city council and the board. We as officials, we can express what we believe and what we achieve. We need to keep working what we have started over the last 10 years. I mean, what we have said before is not the end; it's the beginning of a long process. I mean, with the ATM that is managing the public transport in the city, there is a plan to go full electric before 2030. It's not a joke; it's a huge investment. We still have more than 800 buses to be converted to fit. So that is important. The other one is to keep going the changing in our street, to increase the kilometers of the bike lines, as was done in the last years. But then it's something that in Milan we need to significantly change and increase. And the road is still quite long. It's a long way through. We need to look at Paris, as Mayor Hidalgo has gone to the 30 kilometers per hour, the speed limit in the city. Over the last few years, a lot of new 30 kilometers per hour zone has been introduced in the city, and I think that it's something that we could increase. And it's not only a purpose of mitigation or CO2 emission or air pollution or whatever. It's also to make more safe for our people, for kids, for bike, and for pedestrians. I mean, then it's something that it's important. We need to control and to check that everything in the area, like Porto Romano and the other areas, to be aligned what we was agreed. Something important in terms of surface, because we need to reduce the soil consumption. That is something that is essential. Over the last few years, especially over the last few days, actually, as well, we've seen how an extreme weather event creates a condition that it's, flooding experience is important for the city. So reduce the soil consumption. So to reach the goal in the settembre with the master plan, to reduce 4% the soil consumption is something that is a challenge. It's a challenge to reduce the extra cost of climate change, but it's a challenge as well to make to have a business continuity ongoing for our company and for operating the city. On the other hand, as I need a plan, a quite important plan for building retrofit, especially public residential building. It's a matter of consumption, but also is a matter of quality of living and the comfort for the people that are living in a public residential building. So I think that and let me say something that is important. Milan owns more than 1,100 buildings. It's not a plan, a little plan. It's a bigger investment. It's a big plan that we need to look. And it's important the contribution that the national government is providing in the future years for all the public buildings. And I think that it's something important. At the same time, I think that Milan should improve the capacity to be more connected with the metropolitan area. There is the ATM annual ticket is already covering more than 230 municipalities, but we need to reduce the number of cars and improving the capacity of commuters to come by train or by bike in the future as opposed to. So somehow I think that what was next for the city is continue what we are doing, what we have done over the last years, with a more careful population for people in terms of comfort and living, because as Katarina said, climate change is impacting the city now, not in 50, 56 years. When I read the report, the press release of the report, the new report of articles, there was something that comes to my mind that it's never happened. I'm 39, and not the worst case scenario, even not the intermediate scenario, is the good one, or is supposed the good one. They provided that in 200 and 2100, there will be at least a half meter of sea level rise. And I realized that if I have a son for the daughter, I don't have, I mean, unfortunately, I didn't have a kids. But if you look, I was thinking that my kids, when they will be 80s, they will never see Venice. 80 years. So somehow, I think that what we need to tackle is that climate change is not anymore tomorrow. We already lost 50 years, and our cities are at the risk of climate change. So we need to work on this.
Okay, thank you, Piero. We still have, I think, 5 minutes, and I have one more question, which is the same for all of you. Well, it's 6 weeks to the COP26 conference on climate change in Glasgow. We have lost 1 year for the pandemic last year, and I want to ask each of you if you are optimistic or not with the results of the next climate conference. Katarina, starting with you.
I hope not to go first.
Oh, it's always better to go first, you know.
Well, I'll take off my C40 hat and I will respond as Katarina, so I don't sort of make anybody responsible for my answer. I am not. But I am not because I think that there is a big and huge risk in this moment that I see, which was once a risk for companies and businesses, and now I see it as a risk for politics and politicians, which is greenwashing, which is big commitments to 2050, to 2040, because now we have to, because now Fridays for Future happened, because now nobody can legitimately say anything politically without mentioning the climate crisis. So big commitments, but no plan of action. And I've seen this in the Biden summit a few months ago, where it was impressive. Like, it was the first time after the pandemic that there was every prime minister of the world saying, we're increasing our ambition to 2030, we're increasing our ambition to 2040. And for the first time, you had a big chunk of good commitments. But then when you look at the plans of actions, there is nothing. And the host country is proving to lead the way in this. But the hope that, and it's not rhetorical, the hope that I have, it's the hope that exactly as COP21 happened, when we had the Paris Agreement, it was the mayors and the cities together with civil society for the first time saying we cannot leave this COP without something concrete. Yeah. And I hope this will be the same for COP26, to have the bottom-up people, the citizens, the mayors, civil society, the people actually working on the ground, forcing national governments to come out of that with something concrete.
Thank you, Katarina, for your opinion. I tell you that I perfectly agree with you, and this was exactly the lack of plans of action, was exactly my criticism after Paris Agreement. Tobia, what's your opinion? Are you optimistic or not?
Well, I'm also talking on my own responsibility. I'm not involving ISPI in any way.
Opinions are my own, okay.
I'm less expert, actually, about this conference, but I must say I'm not optimistic as well. I have the feeling, I'm just as a newspaper's reader, that, let's say, national states are working worse than normal people and actually other kind of bodies and organizations. I feel, in my personal experience, really going on the street, I would say, that there is an awareness rising about the urgency of this change and about the importance of this discussion. But then when you go on the newspapers and you read about the negotiations concerning COP26, and by the way, Italy is one of the two co-presidents, and in general about the negotiations between ecological transition among states within multilateral organizations, then you get the feeling that actually, let's say, egoistic attitudes are still prevailing. And this is, I would say, negative both for the result of the conference and for the mood of the people, which is probably even more important than the single agreement.
Thank you very much, and let's see if at least Piero has some good news or some good hopes for us. 1 minute, well, Piero.
I think I think my previous intervention with the negative aspect, but I think that the positive news is what we are going to see next week in Milan. There is the rooftop. I think that is. We have young generation that are more aware of climate change. They are aware that that we need to move forward. And this is, from my side, it's a good news. On the other hand, also what Francis is doing is another good news, because he's promoting also in all the community what is the essential of climate change, that it's not an environmental issue, it's a more an ethical issue. And then I think it's another positive news to increase the consciousness about climate change and the action we should take. So I think that we have good news. The bad news that we should take action now and not more. That is the good action. We don't have any more time to wait. Climate change is now, so we move.
Thank you. Well, let me say thank you to Piero Pellizzaro, to Tobia Zevi, and to Katarina Sarfati for joining us in this opening and very stimulating roundtable. Now let me a couple of minutes to switch from English to Italian, because the next event will be a workshop, but it will be held in Italian, and well, there will be a translation for our attendance, international attendance. Thank you again to each of you, and see you within a couple of minutes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Valeria Lorenzelli, District Manager of UpTown Milan. Tonight, I would like to share the vision of Euro Milano. As real estate developers, we have wondered what's the driver of smart cities. Smart cities are dealing with information technology, infrastructures, but there is also a topic which is linked to human capital and social relationships, and then quality and beauty of spaces, urban planning, beauty of the landscape. From a certain point of view, we need to focus first on technical design, technical planning. And in planning, in designing our neighborhood, we should consider the 300,000 square meter park, a very large green area inside of the city, and geothermal, remote heating, photovoltaic installations. You will hear about these services later. They are part of the smart grid. Professor Francesco Causone will be commenting these technical aspects of the project. We have also imagined to include bike lanes in our planning effort, and we have managed to have 2 bike sharing stations here in this area. Besides the bike sharing stations, we have the community car sharing services starting from November 2021, they should be present here and available to the new uptown residents. And then energy class A plus buildings with the users manuals for the buildings to help residents understand how they can best manage their utilities, their installations. We want to support sustainability at environmental, economic, and social level. To do that, we have introduced for the very first time a new professional profile, the profile of district manager. And this is what I'm doing, following the American and Canadian model. So, based on town center management, we are aware of the fact that public spaces need to be managed, green areas need to be managed, and we are talking, of course, about a green transition, which is a very important topic in cities. Cities which should become actors of change in implementing policies which allow to identify the best solutions in the field of environmental sustainability. What are the governance tools that we need to develop this sustainability vision? Well, super condominiums are just a division, a percentage division of costs of the various flats. In 2017, I have been hired as district manager. I have started listening to the people and have started activating local resources. After several activities, also the 11 real estate operators have joined the project. We have developed a governance structure as it's a common practice in the Anglo-Saxon world. So business improvement district was our reference. The budget allocated was 500,000 euro per year, thanks for mobility, for safety, for energy efficiency. And now we have the next step. We are now consolidating the community after the pandemic. Consolidation of this community happens following these international models. This topic is linked to organizing events. These events are typically free of charge, and there is also ongoing communication in the social media. We have a website which plays a very important role in promotion, in reporting about the activities we carry out. We have also developed an app which is a loudspeaker for all these activities and the topics we want to communicate about. And during the pandemic, we have made La Cascina accessible also for people with disabilities, for instance, deaf and dumb users. There are several events we have organized so far around topics linked to green, to sustainability. Here you see, for instance, Carnival, this party with masked people. We have also tried to involve residents in laying down the milestones. Here you see that they have taken part in this event. The real topic is now we have La Cascina. La Cascina is now operating. We then need to activate citizens, promoting awareness around this natural park. Here you see we have launched these bombs made of sunflower seeds. And the park consists of two areas. There's a northern area with bike lanes. There is green grass which has just been mown. On the east side, there is a wilder part. We have done it on purpose. There is no grass mowing there, and the grass is growing spontaneously. And the topic of park, of green, is linked to how citizens can fall in love with sustainability. There have been 4 editions. This is the 4th edition of the Green Week. We have started in 2018. And one of the very first actions has been to start monitoring the quality of biodiversity inside the park, because knowledge is the starting point for awareness, for developing awareness. In 2020, during the pandemic, we have implemented this project for urban biodiversity with many followers, because there is growing attention around these topics among citizens, of course. We have 20 small houses for wild birds. Then we have an oasis for butterflies with special plants attracting insects that are also pleasant to see. We then have the urban Bee Hives, special labs with the citizens who are now learning to take care of the bee hives, and also, of course, balconies full of flowers. We provide weekly advice about how you can have nicer looking balconies and terraces. An unexpected step in this process was to have families and mothers turning up and asking to do something as volunteers. So this is a summer activity, a sort of summer camp in the park. We have involved them in taking care of this water spring. There is a natural water spring. The water is crystal clear. It's a very natural process that we are seeing here. We are here filtering the water from seaweeds very happily. They have started cleaning and filtering with these small nets the water of the water spring. And we have then involved other companies, associations in this last stage. La Cascina has started operating in 2015 during Expo exhibition. It was hosting many services. At the end of Expo, the exhibition, there has been a time when we had to rethink of the various spaces and services. We have identified a set of services for childhood or for the elderly, which could be useful for the community as a whole. We have been talking with Hauser. In October, they will start this university for the elderly. And Spazio Pensiero, a psychological listening center for children, teenagers, and also adults. And we also have a music schools for people with disability and other users. We have then also recruited 2 general practitioners to provide medical services, and we also have catering services. There is a nice pizzeria, there is also an ice cream shop. Next Saturday we will have the grand opening, and I can give you a preview of our new logo. It's a new logo we have designed after some questionnaires. Here you see N becomes an arch, and you see some green in the background. Our Cascina is the beating heart of the local community, and it's the gate to the natural park, which is in the center of this neighborhood that would like to be innovative, sustainable, and energy efficient. But also social and economic sustainability are equally important. Thank you very much indeed, and I hand over to the next speakers. Urban Bee Hives, a project which has been introduced 7 years ago, has been awarded with the Expo Prize for non-profit organizations. So culture, nature, and biodiversity. It's an international project which aims at reintroducing beehives in the city. Bees are already present in our cities. They are present in our gardens and public parks. Reintroducing beehives means restarting a process of taking care of beehives. We are here at Cascina Merlata in the park, very close to the water spring. The bees need water, of course, not just pollen and nectar. And thanks to Valeria Lorenzelli, we know that the response of the people living here in this neighborhood has been excellent. They are very curious. They are willing to attend our training courses in winter. In the next few days, we will launch the courses for next year. Urban Beehives has got a differentiating feature. All of the beehives have been designed by artists and international designers. They have been restyled, not just wooden boxes. And they also convey a message which is linked to creativity in urban spaces. With reference to beehives, you see some examples. This project has been exhibited also at Garibaldi train station. Some of these activities have then been implemented. Here you see some of the projects which have been completed. So it's really an artisanal activity with local people recycling materials. So reusing, recycling is a very important topic to us. Here you see some of the beehives which have been adopted by citizens, public institutions, bodies, or also by the municipality. The distinctive feature of the beehives we see in the background is that they are elevated, they are not at ground level, as a protection for visitors and also for the bees, which can just fly away if needed, without getting in touch with people, with visitors. These are some of our beehives. We have 4 or 5 clusters of beehives in Milan and also others outside Milan. Here you see a very nice picture. It's a special horizontal, not vertical beehive. And because of its horizontal shape, it's extremely respectful of the life of bees and how they nest in nature, in a wild setting. This is what they tend to do in tree branches. They tend to nest following an horizontal pattern and not a vertical one. It makes them easier to produce honey. Honey producers, of course, would like to accelerate the process, and that's why they tend to develop this vertical pattern. But we would like to keep the bees as free as possible. This area, this district is called Ortica in Milan. Here you see nice beehive of Cascina Merlata. In the background you see the skyline of Milan. And it's really a nice interaction that you see here. We have nature, the beehives, and in the background you have the skyline of a growing city, and there is the park hosting the beehives. Then we have small beehives on terraces. We work a lot by fostering communication with messages, slogans. We organize workshops. We try as much as possible to convey very important messages to raise awareness of citizens. Botany is destiny, is fundamental. So there has been a nice project of balconies full of flowers. They are extremely important for not only for aesthetic purposes, but they allow bees to fertilize the other flowers, other plants, boosting biodiversity. There are many botanical species which can be used. Here you see just some of them. We raise awareness, we promote knowledge of these species, of course, and then we have various activities for citizens, educational activities that are open to everybody, from 5 to 90-year-old people, children, adults, families, and we also want to promote female behaving. We have heard from the previous speaker this this gender equality, which should really be promoted. Beehives are connected with agriculture, with farming, from a logistic, administrative point of view. So these farmers have got several activities, and there are not so many female farmers, but we encourage this kind of gender equality, these women's initiatives as much as possible. Here you see the beehives at Cascina Merlata. We have a new unit, a new cluster for educational activities. We have 4 transparent sites. There are panels that work as a protection for the bees. Through the transparent panels, you see the life of the bees inside with no need to be wearing an uniform as we do. And that's very nice for citizens and for people who attend the courses. They really see how a beehive lives. And another challenge was to accept the invitation at the New York Design Week 4 years ago. There has been the COVID in between. They had seen the beehives at Expo during the exhibition. They have learned and read about our project, so we have been invited to duplicate this project. So a design project for these beehives together with New York designers in Brooklyn, a wonderful experience, very challenging. Everything had to be done there. We have made remote preparations, and then we have been working 1 week installing the beehives, and then also organizing training. Here you see the Design Week booth in New York. A wonderful place along the river, and the beehive that you see here has been designed by a Brooklyn designer. This is just a prototype. They have then produced the beehives. They have been installed on roofs. And the table has also been designed by Manhattan designers, a co-design of an Italian and a New York designer. Very light table made of wood, easy to move, with this hexagonal shape. Every evening there were honey-based drinks that were offered there. Associations which were already operating in this field were inviting people. We have created a network to present also the honey, and there were also tasting sessions. And here you see Paul Clement's pictures or photos. Here you see architecture reproducing the shape of a beehive. Be the change, that's our catchword. I will use it to conclude this short speech. We can also be actors of change, getting closer to the bees, to the beehives, to this wonderful world allows us to be actors in this process of change. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Claudia Zanfi, for this wonderful presentation, for this introduction into the world of bees. Francesco Causone from Politecnico University in Milan will be talking about the monitoring and management of energy and greenhouse gases in the urban context. Thank you very much indeed for introducing me. I hope I can upload my slides. My contribution will be rather technical, but there are some references to the introductory remark about climate change and what we can do to manage this phenomenon in the urban context through our buildings. Unfortunately, cities countries as a whole contribute to 36% of and final energy use, causing about 39% of CO2 emissions related to energy consumption. Talking about built environment, well, here you see emissions from the construction sector are mainly coming from materials, extraction of raw materials, manufacturing processes, manufacturing concrete, reinforced concrete, steel, glass, and 28% of emissions come from building operation, air conditioning, heating, warming or cooling buildings, and providing services that are necessary for life in our dwellings. 11% can some way be reduced by reducing use of one-way materials and by optimizing the use of natural raw materials. But this is not the topic of my presentation. I will focus on this 28% of energy of CO2 emissions, partly depending on the construction processes and then on management, what we often define as facility management, and then, of course, how we manage our buildings, the behavior of the tenants. There are some pluses here. So, of course, the construction phase can be important. Then we have facility management, which is even more important. And then our behavior as tenants is crucially important. The action to improve the performances of buildings follows this logic. So we have a ranking list in terms of importance. So there is a permanent effect which is difficult to change. And in facility management, there's much we can do to improve the state of things, even more so when it comes to our behavior as people living in the buildings. We have heard as citizens we can really contribute to counteracting climate change. I was not skipping to the conclusions, so there is still the central part of my contribution. We are now talking about the limitations or the constraints of the current status. Almost no existing buildings and few new buildings have got a well-conceived monitoring system for energy consumption. It's just like having a car without a speedometer. You don't know where you're heading, how fast you're driving, which can be dangerous if you're approaching a bend, for instance. Also, new buildings that are sometimes equipped with this monitoring systems don't have remote controls. If there is a failure, if there is a problem, it's extremely helpful to operate and to control remotely. This can reduce energy costs, energy consumption, and also emissions linked to the energy that is misused. So there are failures that are detected maybe after months or years. Imagine how much emission you could have spared. And then, to do building monitoring, you need to have systems to manage, to transfer the data and to analyze the data, give a feedback to managers and to citizens. So you need to create urban scale infrastructures allowing to transport energy and to provide services to citizens. Digitalization, which is often approached not only at Italian but also at European level, is central also when it comes to climate change. If we don't transfer and manage data, it will be extremely difficult to develop the right policies to handle, to reduce emissions coming from buildings. And something else, another part of the puzzle echoing previous contributions. These data can be gathered, they can be processed, and they need to be returned to citizens so that they are all aware of their energy consumption, and they can be encouraged to behave more wisely also in managing the buildings we live in. So each droplet in the ocean can make a difference. Let me just draw to the conclusions. This is not a long presentation, it's just a short contribution about a very important topic. As we have said so far, if we do not measure our energy use, which is unfortunately the case in most of the buildings, then we cannot know what our actual emissions are, how far we are contributing to causing, to exacerbating climate change. If we don't know how many emissions we produce, then it's possible to implement climate mitigation policies. As we have already heard from previous speakers, there's attention, but all too often the policies are not duly scaled and adjusted to the scope of the problems we need to tackle. If we cannot develop proper mitigation policies, we will never be able to attain the challenging targets of the goals we often discuss about as during COP meetings. If we cannot attain these goals, it will be extremely difficult to counteract climate change in the future. So let's start from something simple, monitoring our energy consumption, to attain a very important goal, counteracting the climate change. Thanks, Francesco, for your contribution. It was not too difficult, not very technical, very easy to understand. Thank you very much indeed. So, Francesco Tomasinelli, urban biologist, will be talking about urban biodiversity and green systems. So let's talk about urban biodiversity with you. Good evening.
Perfetto.
Great.
L'idea del mio intervento di stasera
My contribution tonight aims at telling you more about urban biodiversity and wildlife in the cities and how wild animals can tell us something about the quality of urban settings. Very often we have been talking about wildlife in the cities during the pandemic. Wild animals have approached our cities, but this has started happening a long time ago, not because of the quality of our urban spaces is excellent, but intensive farming around urban areas makes the life for wild animals extremely difficult, and sometimes in cities they find better living conditions. The so we can really follow them to get indication about the quality of urban spaces. Here you see birds, insects and mammalians. Not all insects. There are some groups that are easier to observe. We are talking about butterflies or birds who are great bioindicators. They are present all over the year. They are very demanding in terms of quality of the environment. So they are good indicators of the quality of natural settings. In our urban spaces, we have several species. We have animals, wild animals close to rivers. And then here you see we have other useful indicators of biodiversity. Which are the best bioindicators? The species that are really sensitive and can tell us something about the quality of nature. The green woodpecker, for instance, because they need large trees to live, they need the specific conditions, they eat insects, and they need a well-structured community to survive. And also the hooded crow or pigeons, which don't tell us much about the quality of urban spaces. They can survive everywhere. Here you see some data after a survey, and we have measured the data here. In 2019, we have started measuring data. We have stopped during the pandemic. We have resumed data measurement in 2021. We have been working on these animals, butterflies, dragonflies, and birds, trying to identify with some techniques all the species which were present, trying to correlate the collected data, for instance, like hooded crows, and then green woodpeckers, which were more relevant. And within 2 years, the values measured for butterflies, for instance, for birds, have improved a lot. And here you see dragonflies. They tend to live very close to waterways. This has nothing to do with the pandemic in this specific case, as people suggest. It has got to do with a gradual improvement in the quality of urban spaces. We now have new trees that have been planted. Some of them have been growing over time, and they can host communities of wild animals. And we have green areas. We have grass. Insects are living there. Insects are essential to support larger, more structured communities. Many flowers, many insects, many pollinators, and also many birds. This is an ideal system of management which requires more attention. So we focus a lot on properly mown grass in the backyard. But if we consider biodiversity, it doesn't make a real difference. So there are other green areas that are more interesting as bioindicators. This approach is becoming more popular in the Isola neighborhood of Milan. There are larger surfaces of grass with flowers, with plants, and people who live there really appreciate that. When we talk about cities, we tend to think cities are not the best place for insects, for wildlife to live, but they can be extremely attractive also to wildlife where there are flatlands. Also, when these flatlands are densely populated, we have been talking about intensive farming and the effects that it can have. Cities can be interesting because they host micro habitats that are relevant for many animal species, and they tend to make cities more pleasant And we need to take a new approach to green ecosystems, to cities. We could start discussing about ecological networks, green structures, green strategies to improve and the quality of life and reinforce biodiversity. They have been tested on large surfaces. They can also play a central role in urban spaces. And then another component which is very important are ecosystemic services, all goods and services that green systems can provide. There is an important element. So we should really measure the economic impact of these processes. Let me just show you what I mean by that. What do we mean by urban ecological environmental network? What are the dimensions? I can tell you that these are reference values, just for you to have some figures. An urban park should be at least 0.5 hectare large to attract a sufficient number of birds making nests. Then this place can be important. Smaller surfaces tend to be less attractive, and you also need a certain size of trees. This kind of approach can be useful to design more livable cities, more interesting cities. This is a map for a study implemented at Bra in Piedmont, 30,000 people living there. We have been asked to set up an ecological network to become part of the Green Project with a focus on pre-existing green systems, introducing a new approach to green areas, new management technologies to preserve the urban ecosystem. We have carried out a feasibility study starting from already existing trees. The trees which were already present. We have explored all the green areas of the city. We have completed the stock-taking exercise, and we have also carried out monitoring of wildlife. Here you see birds, butterflies, to get confirmation of the data, to see whether urban parks, which were so structured in terms of botanical diversity, were really hosting communities, sufficiently complex communities of wild animals. Here you see this bar chart. Urban parks have turned out to be by far more significant than surrounding farming areas that you have, for instance, here on the right-hand side. And here we don't have very much. Intensive farming has really destroyed everything. Biodiversity is reduced to a minimum. There is extensive use of pesticides. Urban parks, in a context like this one, are a source of biodiversity, except for hills, which require a different management. Next step, we have considered ecosystemic services in the various green areas. We have developed a quality indicator resting upon the services offered by the individual areas. Here you see the leaf mass of the trees which were present in these areas, following a well-established protocol for ecosystems. Here you see the darker areas. So we have larger parks providing better ecosystemic services. Here you see this ecological network, this grid which has help guide maintenance operations of the green surface, of the green area in Bra, in Piedmont, and it will prepare also future interventions in urban spaces. Local administrators have taken charge of these areas, and they have identified priorities, and they have decided to implement certain actions following the guidelines of the ecological network, of the multifunctional ecological network. This urban park, an urban park of 1 hectare in this context, can provide 50,000 euro worth eco-systemic services like climate mitigation, reduction of CO2, services of social and cultural interest. 50,000 euro net of operating costs for trimming, for pruning plants, for cleaning the areas. Thank you very much indeed for listening. These are just some references for you. Thank you very much indeed, Francesco Tomasinelli, for your passion in describing urban biodiversity. We are here, there's green grass. I don't know whether this is the result of urban planning or not. I'm still in doubt. Talking about Bra, I was thinking that Italy is made of many small towns. We don't have many cities with 10 million people, and I'm very glad to introduce the last discussant tonight, Lorena Marin, councillor at Santo Nadi Piave, close to Venice, talking about the role of a small community. Good evening. Thanks for inviting me. I would like to thank you because it doesn't happen very often to see that also small communities are invited to take the floor during such important meetings. I would like to share our experience and what we are trying to do in a town within a community, engaging citizens. We have been educating them to participate, to gain awareness, to be accountable vis-à-vis the challenges we are facing. So there are small gestures, small actions we can carry out at local level. Let me just tell you something about the distinctive features of Santo Nadi Piave. We are a small, medium-sized town with 42,000 people living. That's the surface, 79 square kilometers. Population density, 530 people per square kilometer. We are located in an area that you see here on the map. That's Adriatic Sea, 10 kilometers away from the coast. We are part of the metropolitan city of Venice in the eastern part, so this is our geographical context. We are lengths of water. This is how we define our territory. It's a definition which highlights the vulnerability, the weakness of our territory. So after land reclamation, this land has emerged, but almost half of the surface is below sea level. There is the Piave River, which is crossing Santo Nadi Piave, which has made the fortune, but has also exposed Santo Nadi to risks. We have limited space. We do no longer have large surfaces because of the questionable town planning of the past. We have almost 140 hectares of green areas, and there are also 30 hectares of wood. If you look at these pictures, they describe, I think they are self-explanatory. If we talk about climate change, we can say that we are trying to do whatever we can to reduce the increase in temperature. So 1.52 degrees. Otherwise, we would no longer survive in this town. There is no alternative. We have to do that. We have to attain that. If the sea level increases, we will disappear. We will be submerged by water. What are the main risks we have in the field of climate change? There is a risk coming from water because we have heavy rainfalls. There is a water risk linked to the distinctive features of our territory. And over the last few years, we have had long periods of drought. So water plays a central role. And increase in temperature on the earth should be controlled as much as possible. Another urban phenomenon has got to do with the so-called heat island. I was showing, we were talking about population density. There are also farming areas. If we consider we have to deduct these surfaces, we have high population density in some urban areas. And we feel we are part of significant contests. Small towns can play a role, and they need to establish relationships with the context. So they have to be active part of this context. We are talking about Europe, Italy, Veneto region. We are the 9th largest city. We are part of the metropolitan city of Venice, and we are in the eastern part of Venezia. Here you see the 22 municipalities in this eastern part of the region. I have selected these pictures because I wanted to give you a term of comparison to describe the path of the journey we have started. As a city, Santo Nadi Piade has decided to tackle the challenge of climate change through a path which is the logical consequence of our vision of sustainable development. We deemed that with the right premises, also a small town like ours can become a testimonial of change. So a clear intention, a clear vision, a well-defined strategies. Change in a context like ours, so in a small town, can be facilitated some ways because there is greater sharing, greater participation of citizens than you might have in a larger cities. So shared path, shared processes with the citizens to share know-how and skills. There are some tangible examples of what we have been able to achieve. So with the University of Bologna and Siena, we have organized joint projects and then studies of ecosystemic services, cooperation in organizing events, together with the consortia doing land reclamation. We have been collaborating to foster resilience vis-à-vis climate change. Then we talk about raising awareness towards climate change and vulnerability of the affected areas. We also have a museum on land reclamation. There are two things we are working on: promoting awareness of present conditions and then also fostering a backward-looking culture. Recalls should not be lost. What we are today is the result of our history, of the local history, which allows us to understand how we can manage this context better. And then we shouldn't forget risks, past and present risks. There are floodings. There has been a flooding in 2018. And then also in 2019, to a lesser extent. These were really terrible days. So you tend to lose memory of what has happened. There is a need to go back to normal. And this prompts us to forget the risks we run every day. And this is yet another aspect we need to work on. So ongoing work with the citizens, with the local communities, historical memory, and also keeping risks in mind. Then there are small actions and widespread best practices we have implemented as a conscious response to increasing awareness. There are various meetings we organize to exchange experiences and to disseminate knowledge in various contexts. Schools are the first beneficiaries of our activities. We have eco-school projects, schools introducing best practices, attaining certification, and other projects like Ortivista, a very important project, school orchards, where you grow organic vegetables and pupils learn the value of the soil, the technique of water management involving farmers. They give us plots of land for these activities. We educate them to healthy food, to organic farming. Within the context of these projects that start on a small scale, you can really achieve a lot. We are also talking about rediscovery of old varieties, old species, also wheat species. They tend to be by far more resistant to climate change than the commonly used one. And all of that has been declined into the context of an action plan for sustainable energy and climate that we have introduced. This action plan is a tool approved by local administrators, and it's a tool of citizens. Here you see there is a booklet. You will find also information on our website. So this is not a list of actions for local administrators. This is what every citizen can do. This booklet has been handed out to all the families living in the city, 17,500 families. Volunteers have knocked on the doors, and they were wearing this vest, this blue vest, and they have started talking with the people to explain what we wanted to achieve through this action plan. A very interesting experience. Then there will be a questionnaire to ask their opinion about the proposed topics, a video clip for the social media to reach a younger audience. Maybe they are not willing to read the booklet, and this is how we will continue our activities in the future. But if we ask the others what they should do, maybe before that we should give a good example of what is feasible. So let's bear witness through tangible actions. In a challenging context, as you can see here, it's not easy to bring about a change. We have started discussing about sustainable mobility. Here you see the before and after photos, how things have changed. And this has happened in a participatory process. We have involved companies, associations dealing with mobility. In this area, in this space you see here, we have regenerated the street. We now have more trees. The old ones were really suffering. We have been using draining materials. We try as much as possible to use these selected materials, and here you see also the areas for pedestrians are free to improve accessibility, of course. Then we have these pedestrian zones, limited speed areas. We have many also projects for kids, events. As to water management, we are now showing these rain gardens, sustainable urban drainage models. So this is the waterway staged with parents. This is a rain garden in a school. The water collected and flowing into the water pipes has been collected to nourish, to feed, to irrigate this beautiful rain garden, which makes the space more pleasant. And it has been designed and implemented by our gardeners. We have learned lessons from other projects. Also with the University of Padua, we have a very close cooperation, but also a small town like ours, where we have many municipal activities. We have people who are really capable of designing and implementing these projects. Here you see a draining trench. We don't want to overload our water pipes. When it rains very heavily, we might have some problems. And this is why we have created, we have set up these spaces. Here you see there were no plants. Everything was flooded by rain. And after installation of these draining trenches, also in case of heavy rainfalls, there is no stagnation of water. You are doing something like that also in Milan. Maybe this is a smaller scale project, but we have done our best. We haven't done everything on our own. This can be a limitation for small towns like ours. We have turned out and searched for cooperation partners who have been involved in our projects. The university has allowed us to develop this urban drainage project and to measure the effectiveness with the metropolitan town within the context of the European Elena project and the Amica E project. We have started a project to re-qualify public lighting, for instance, and for upgrading buildings in terms of energy consumption. So a small, very active town. There is probably even more we could do. So maybe we receive assignments from by neighboring cities. We have a conference of mayors, and together we have organized wider scope projects. 22 municipalities together, for instance, have organized this master plan for sustainable mobility with bike lanes. Here you see planning and sustainable mobility. Another example, a very small town with 13,000 people, very keen on environmental topics. And this gives the opportunity to smaller towns with fewer resources to be part of a broader project. And then we have the widespread wood. It's a project which is now ranking first at national level. There has been a call for projects in the field of urban reforestation with the Italian Forest Organization. We have developed this project. There has been a cluster of towns to have a minimum surface of larger than 10 hectares. Of course, we have been supported by Venice Metropolitan City. We were conscious that there were not larger surfaces we could plant, but we wanted to start doing something like that, taking urban parks to reforest the areas, to have more biodiversity. And maybe this will open up new opportunities. So let's plant the future. Let's do something together. We are calling upon citizens. We are prompting them to act, to donate, to work as volunteers so they can plant trees. And we have to do that together with €1 donation, with the school, with a group of pupils, we can attain ambitious goals, replanting these areas. So I would like to conclude my contribution. So I would like to conclude saying that the more demanding and global the challenges are, the more important the role of small towns and communities becomes, where relationships are facilitated that make the sharing of objectives and paths more effective. If those who manage them are able to develop visions and strategies, then small-scale realities that act consistently are able to develop, to grow, with tangible actions, recognizable testimonials of best experiences, feeling part of a broader context, seeking out collaboration and synergies and seizing opportunities enables us to look up and attain even more ambitious goals. Thank you very much indeed for the time, for your attention.
Io invece voglio ringraziare
I
l'assessore
would
Lorena Marin
like
per
to
3
thank
ragioni.
Lorena
Allora, la
Marin
prima
for 3
innanzitutto per il
reasons.
fatto che,
First,
mi ha dimostrato per l'ennesima volta che quando
again,
c'è una
he
passione,
has
una competenza,
showed,
le amministrazioni locali
she has
possono fare
shared
tantissimo.
her passion.
La
Local
seconda
administrators can
ragione è
really
per aver
achieve a
richiamato la
lot.
memoria.
And
Senza
then
la
she
memoria
was
non andiamo da
talking
nessuna
about
parte, era già stato
not
detto in
losing
qualche modo
our
questa sera.
memories. We have
Ci ha
already heard
ricordato
that
l'uso della
tonight.
bonifica, che
We
sappiamo
should,
benissimo cosa significa. Abbiamo
for
avuto delle
instance,
aree
visit the
paludose che
Museum
sono
of
state
Land
recuperate,
Reclamation. There were sumps
per 1000
which have been
ragioni, per le
dried
aree della malaria,
we,
sappiamo tutte queste
to
cose.
get rid
E
of
il
malaria,
rischio
for
con un
instance,
eccesso
and
di riscaldamento globale è
with the
veramente
global
perdere una parte
heating,
di
we
quella
could
che
really
quando
lose
era meravigliosa
memory
sedimentaria del
of
primo
our
tempo.
beautiful
La terza
past.
ragione
And
è
the
che
third
la
reason for
dimostrazione
thanking her
pratica di
is
quella cosa che
that
si dice
she
ormai da
has
anni.
really
Think
proved
global, act
that
local.
you have to
Che
think global
significa,
but
da una
act
parte, che dobbiamo
local.
lavorare a livello
We
locale,
need to
perché
work
non
at
si può
local
fare
level.
diversamente.
We
Ognuno
couldn't
deve
do
fare, come
otherwise.
dire, lavorare sul suo
Everybody should
territorio.
work at
Dall'altra
a
parte,
local
think
level,
global,
but
per una
we
ragione
should think
semplicissima,
global
perché
for a
il
very
riscaldamento
simple
climatico,
reason.
da questo
Global
punto di vista,
heating is a
esattamente
global
come la
problem.
pandemia.
Just like the
Non c'è nessuna
pandemic,
possibilità, o se ne esce
there
tutti
is no
quanti,
alternative, and we
questo
need to
ringrazio
get
tutti,
out
vi
of
auguro
it
buona
all
serata,
together.
buona
Have a very
continuazione con la
nice
Green
evening,
Week,
and
di
I
Milano
wish
e di
you
UpTown
very
Green.
much success with the Green Week. Thank you.